Now, a test and trace worker has hit the headlines today after he reportedly sent a woman a flirty text message after he went to her house to check that she was self-isolating. What are you doing there? Do you want to hear the text?
Yes, girl.
OK, here's the text. Hi. Do I have your permission to save your number at all? Please ignore this if you don't want that or have a husband or whatever. Lol. Apologies, I asked. Jane, is that crossing the line?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, he's using state data. That is state data, and she is in her own home, and he is, yeah, he's absolutely crossed the line. It's not like being on Tinder, where she's willfully put herself on Tinder and said, hey, I'm looking for a date with somebody. That's personal choice. He's used state data for that's in the system for a completely different reason.
OK,
and
right,
I
here's a
think
different
that's very
example.
unsettling.
Let me give you a different example. This happened within my group. A guy from a food delivery company, I'll have to say, arrived at the door with food for a bunch of 14, 15-year-old girls. One of the girls opened the door and he went, "You're beautiful. Can I have your number? Or can I keep your number?" Now, that's...
Hello, head office. I'd like to get this man sacked, please.
So that's totally out of line?
There's no grey area with Jane.
No?
14 years old.
But he didn't know that.
That's
Well, you must have.
But I think
Come on.
what goes wrong here, like, actually, when you look at that text, thinking back to what we were just saying earlier, that seems like a fairly... He's saying, I'm sorry, is it OK? I agree with Jane, he shouldn't have done that. But I think what happens too often is that a lot of men assume that any attention is always a compliment. And I understand that because they haven't lived the way that we've lived as women. And that actually, often they don't understand that it can be incredibly intimidating, especially if it's your own home.
Exactly.
So I
That's
think
the line.
I think we have to work harder.
If you're in a bar
to
and
make
somebody
men
gets up and says,
understand that.
You know, I like you, can I give you my number? Completely different thing. But when they know where you live...
So it's the home thing that is the line,
It is.
do you
I think it is a home thing. Let's keep it real, girls. You know, if you was at a workplace and you had an email, you saw a nice person in the other department, you'd email them something so you could have a little communication. But you don't know where they live, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the fact that they know where you live, you feel a little bit more vulnerable. I had a situation years ago, a cabbie picked me up because it was late. They needed my number so they could phone to say, you know, I'm outside. I took the cab and then... By the time they dropped me off, they'd text saying, oh, you know, nice conversation, would love to get to know you.
I would
and I
not
was
have like that.
I was a little bit creeped out in the sense of like, oh my gosh, you've picked me up from
But what if
my
you had
house.
fancied him?
If I'd fancied him, you know what, let's be real, if you'd fancied him, you might have been one of those situations 10 years later saying, go on, babes, tell them how we met. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Remember you picked me up and asked for a number. But still, I think in any situation, whether you're man, woman or they, I think you need to think about how you're making someone else feel at that
But
point.
are we being
and
too
knowing their
suspicious of men?
No, I
Are
think
we
that
saying that every man is potentially...
No, I think if it was a
do.
female delivery driver coming to the door and...
But we know that that's not often
I
what we
do think
discuss,
of
is it?
every man as a potential danger.
Really?
Not
Do you?
every man is, of course, but to stay safe, you know, growing up in London, that's the way I think about it.
So would you teach your girls that every man is a potential danger?
Absolutely, that you have to be aware that somebody could be one thing and be another. And I think, so all this, I've said this before, all this after the tragedy of Sarah Everard and the Reclaim the Streets, I never felt we had the streets. I am constantly thinking about every single thing I do. What time will it be? Will it be dark? Who's that at the door? Shall I call out? I'm doing it the whole time. I'm constantly running a checklist to stay safe. And that's what I learnt from a young girl walking on the streets.
It's a shame, because
that's what I teach my children.
I hear what you're saying, but I do try to... I think as well that it can be women or men or they. I just think that you need to learn and have that sensory of, you know, because we know there's in some situations, some crimes that have been done by women as well.
So do you teach your children to be suspicious of everyone, every
Cautious.
stranger?
I teach my children the reality of what is going on in the world, which they can see. They can see down the road, down the next ends, they can see on the TV. We see what's happening on the news every day in that era, so it's about being aware.
Most people are good.
Well, look, girl, you listen, send your kids to my house for a little while, because I let them know how it is. I don't want them to be bogged down with everything that's going on, but I need them to be aware. I need them to understand how they feel in a situation. And that's one of the things. Sometimes We're not speaking to the kids about how did someone make you feel. Sometimes that is enough for you to know.
Yeah, trust your instincts.
This is not a good situation or something doesn't feel comfortable, because if we don't teach them that, they will never be able to come to us and say, Mum, something didn't feel right about that person.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I say it to my kids all the time, there are more good people than bad, but you don't know which ones are, so you have to be cautious. Yeah. Cautious.
It's a cynical old world, but
it's
maybe
horrible.
it has to be. Maybe
it's
it has
horrible.
to be.